elements today. So I thought one of my triskels would be a rather good sort of way of introducing the talk. I'm talking about my work and the work of Manx designer ArchibaldKnox, because he's been a really big influence upon my work, and the Deer's Cry, that's otherwise known as St. Patrick's Breastplate, because ArchibaldKnox used that for his masterwork, and I in turn have been inspired by ArchibaldKnox and also the Deer's Cry, but via a slightly different route. And this image this is a Manx Nicky going around the edge, and I thought that's a bit like me dancing around the edge of all of this. So to start, I know what I was going to say. To start off with, I started off with an academic background and had big plans on saving the world, but the universe had other plans for me, and I instead of going to my graduation ceremony in sort of geography and anthropology, I went sailing and returned had post-viral fatigue, and things went in a different direction. I came back to the Isle of Man and got a job on the island and started to learn all about ArchibaldKnox at that time. So it's a kind of a weaving story, rather like the Triskel. So we have ArchibaldKnox. He was a designer born in 1864 and died in 1933. He was of Scottish origin and was born on the island to a family of mechanical of engineers, and he didn't go into the family firm working in engineering, unlike the rest of his brothers. He became an artist and an art teacher, and he studied the Manx crosses. He was very much into the archaeology of the island. He went to Douglas Art School and then became a teacher at Douglas School of Art, and he then went to teach in London. Teaching was a big part of his life, and in a way he's sort of taught me from beyond his grave, because I had a craft background rather than a painting and drawing background. He is most famous for being a designer for Liberty of London. He was a ghost designer. They didn't actually credit their designers at the time. You can sort of see his work. It's usually got Tudoric or Kymric printed on it. That's not his name, but he designed a lot of the work. And now the belief is that he's designed about 5,000 things for Liberty. Artifacts coming out all the time. Hopefully there's a big book coming out soon with a lot of this information in. He also did a lot of works on paper, and that's the Deer's Cry. But anyway, firstly, going back to my story. So I come back to the Isle of Man and I get a job with the jewellers, and there's not many Knox resources on the island. He's very much under-celebrated on the island. There's moves now to increase his knowledge on the island. I forgot to mention, he was a deeply spiritual man, and he was a mason, and he was a bit of a mystic, so this kind of informs his work as well. Okay, so back to so I came back, I got a job in a jewellery shop. I was making my own jewellery at university as a sort of a side hustle, painted wooden jewellery, and I would mine the sort of often black and white resources for little motifs that I could use in my own work. One from the top here, the top of this spoon, is one that I used a lot in my work. And then this was another piece that I found. Any book that had ArchibaldKnox work in it, I would buy. And this was another one that I used in my jewellery. So this is the wooden jewellery that I made, and it was all sort of painted wood, and I did this for quite a long time, and I supplied the Manx Museum, and it was really sought after, actually. It just took forever. And what was next? I worked in this jewellery shop with a guy called Tony Lewis, and he had also sort of mined the Knox archive for imagery, and a lot of the jewellery that I was cleaning up in the jewellery shop were these sort of pieces, which sort of fried my brains a bit in their construction. And this is a page from the Deer's Cry, and I think this was by Knox that Tony used, and I think this was one that was found in the bin by Knox's students. He left he was teaching in London, and he was told, he was criticised by the school inspectors for encouraging students to express their own individuality, which was sort of against the thinking of the time. So he resigned, threw a load of papers in the bin, which his students rescued, and that's how we know that he was working on it in 1912. Anyway, so this was one of the papers, and it's quite astonishing, the artwork. So this was another one of the papers, Deer's Cry, that I used. There was a book that was published of some of the pages of the Deer's Cry in 1983, the 50th anniversary of Knox's birth. And yeah, this was another one. At this point, I wasn't really into the whole religion thing at all. So I just kind of looked at the pretty pictures and the lines, and the sort of underlying spirituality didn't mean that much to me. But it was just amazing. So I thought at this point, I'll talk a little bit about the Deer's Cry itself. It's kind of, there's so many different elements weaving through, it's just how to get it through into a form. The Deer's Cry itself, I've since found out, it's a lorica. It's got many things. Words of power is one of its ways. It was first referred to in the 7th century, but it was attributed to St. Patrick, and I think the first reference to it in writing was in the 11th century, and it was then translated into English in 1911. And Knox probably came across this sort of work because his cousin in Scotland was a collector of incantations in Scotland. The Carmina Gadelica was by his cousin, which may or might not mean something to you. So Knox was also into the Book of Kells, as well as the sort of Manx crosses. We've got over 100 Manx crosses on the island, and he went through the Manx crosses. He studied them and wrote about them. So at this point, I'll go through the Deer's Cry by the part that I've used for my work, to give you a flavour of Knox's work. So this is, I bind myself today to the virtue of heaven. You see that he had this sort of complex Celtic interlace with the words all woven inside, and you had to sort of really look to find the words, and it's sort of described as a sort of, it must have been a meditation in him doing it as well as in the viewing of it. But it was not for public view. He says he spent 20 years doing this, and it was incomplete at his death. Okay, so I bind myself today through virtue of heaven, in light of sun, in brightness of snow, in splendour of fire, in speed of lightning, in swiftness of wind, in depth of the sea, in stability of earth, in compactness of rock. And I always feel that the energy shifts a little bit in the room when you say the words, and that's sort of the words of power, and this is sort of what I felt when I worked with this work later on. And the Deer's Cry actually has eight stanzas, and this is the one that's about nature, and this sort of is the link between paganism and Christianity. Sort of pagan beliefs matched Christianity in its sort of Irish Celtic Christianity, so there was sort of a mix, and it's very much the I'm not even going to go to my notes. They sort of described it almost as the inner membrane of sort of the lives meeting. I've got that wrong, but anyway, the two belief systems kind of matched and blended within the Deer's Cry St Patrick's Breastplate. And the 8 stanzas, there's two about the Trinity, about Christ's life, about it's calling in the angels, and there's sort of archangels. Then there's one about all the evils that you've got to sort of be protected against. Yeah, what was next? Oh yeah. So yeah, and there's all different translations of the Deer's Cry as well, which all comes in later. Anyway, going back to me, I did all this Celtic stuff on the island, which was great, but I also sailed, and I then got involved in the sailing world, and I started to crew on yachts and go to sailing events, and travelled around the world. I exhibited in America and the Caribbean, and got quite well known for that, actually. And I came back to the Isle of Man, and sort of life went a bit squirrely for a while, and I got to a point where I just couldn't paint, and it was actually getting really serious. And I was thinking maybe I had to give up being an artist because I just couldn't paint anymore. So I kind of thought, right, I'm going to have to work on this. And so I started doing all sorts of random stuff. I went on a whole spiritual journey, really. And I went to healers, and I went to did work with shamans, therapists, art journaling, all sorts. And it started to open my mind to the fact that actually the art wasn't me that was creating it. It was something that was kind of moving through me. So I wasn't sort of responsible for it. I just kind of had to almost open the channels. And part of this process was I went on a meditation retreat to Yorkshire, and it's the first one I'd ever done, and I kind of went there. It was just like the universe was kicking my ass, it has to be said. And so I just went. I sort of put the check through to the person I had to late at night, and I went, right, I'm going. And I was in this room meditating, and suddenly all this Celtic knotwork started moving and forming in my head, somewhat like this earlier sketch from a sketchbook that I found, and it was just like forming, and it was just moving and just moving. It was a really cool experience. So anyway, I was starting to kind of feel better with all of this stuff, and I came back to the Isle of Man from that, and I was feeling a bit braver, and it was coming up to the anniversary of Knox's death, 150th anniversary of his birth, it would have been. There was a big exhibition on the Isle of Man, and I had to revisit my Celtic work because it was going to be exhibited alongside Macintosh and Knox and things, and that was a really cool thing. And I thought, well, maybe I'm onto something here. So, and I was also then asked to produce some educational resources for the exhibition. So I then looked back at knot construction and came up with some real cool little techniques. And I was then asked to design a logo for our Inter-Celtic Festival. And I had designed a triskel for somebody previously who had a company called Triskel Productions, and he didn't actually use the logo. Thanks, Lenny. So I had it pinned up going, I know this is a really good one. So I then started working with the triskel, and I lost 3 days just constructing, making more and more complex constructions around the triple spiral, just really as a sort of a symbolic form. I didn't really know anything about its meaning. I know there's big gaps, isn't it? You think from the Isle of Man I would know this. So yeah, and then I did this, and then all these drawings, and then I went on a weekend with some friends who were sort of healers and shamans, and I was talking to Maggie, and I was describing my process with all of this, and she said, you will be sort of reintegrating yourself doing that. And it sort of felt sort of what was going on. And there's a load of other weird stuff went on that weekend, like a medium came up to me and said she had a message from spirit from me, and it was just, it has been quite a journey. So anyway, I did that. And then for years I've done the artwork for our traditional boat weekend. So I then did this one, and these are all boats that would come to the weekend. This is Peel around the outside, and this is St Patrick's Isle, because there's history with St Patrick on the Isle of Man, but that comes in a little bit later. And I was working on this, and I met the shaman friend, and he said, you know, the central part of the triskel is really important. That's the still, silent part. So I started looking into the triskel, and you know, just went, oh right, okay, the sort of the powers of three, the triple spirals, the energy going in and out, mother, maiden, crone, land, sea, sky. You know, all meanings come into it, and then you have the still, silent center. So that was cool. It was all, you know, all the little pieces were coming together. And so anyway, the other thing that I took on, I kind of do like scaring myself, was to represent the island at FestivalInterceltique de Lorient. It was a big exhibition. I hadn't actually done a big exhibition for about 15 years. I did one in America of my America work, but it was just kind of like, right, Nick, you're going to have to do it. So it was a bit like I was in my scriptorium, really. Again, it was just like, right, into the attic, get this one sorted. And I did feel physically ill for quite a long time doing it. Anyway, I picked up a copy of Anam Cara by John O'Donoghue, and opened on page 3, as I recall. And there was another translation of The Deer's Cry. Instead of I bind myself today, which is Knox's one, it was I arise today. And that matched, you know, it was very much aligned with the type of meditation that I'd been doing. And it was the nature verse of The Deer's Cry that John O'Donoghue talked about. It's a cracking book, Anam Cara. Highly recommend it if you don't know. And John O'Donoghue generally. So I thought, right. And actually, in the same chapter, each day as a journey came up, and that inspired the first image that you saw. So I thought, I arise today. So I then did The Deer's Cry, or the 9 lines from The Deer's Cry in triskels. I didn't refer to Knox's work because it will fry my brains, but I just used my sort of quite intuitive flowing line that I had sort of mastered really by doing all the sailing work, you know, drawing the sails, because I worked in classic yachts, really beautiful lines on the boats, and the sort of description of if it looks right, it is right, which is very much how I worked. So here is my first Deer's Cry. I arise today through strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendour of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, and compactness of rock. And then that was the 9 hanging. But, you know, the energy changing is so cool. So, you know, I was in this room in Lorient, and I'd be saying it out and feeling the energy and go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And there was other triskels that I'd done as well, and one lady was coming up to me saying, oh, yeah, I'm having visions from your triskels. And it was like, you know, I'm onto something, but I don't know what it is really. And yeah, it was great. So I was very happy about that. Anyway, what was next? Oh yeah, I came back to the island, and the triskels, they were building a new mental health unit on the island, and I was asked to do some artwork on quite a strict brief for the foyer, and they wanted around the edges to be able to use for fabrics and things within the unit was the idea. It wasn't done in the end. And then the corner pieces were the different sort of wards we were in the unit. So I did all the edge and had a great time doing that. That was very much within my comfort zone. And for this, because I'd been doing all the shamanic stuff, I did a Celtic medicine wheel. So you have earth, air, fire and water round the sides, and then spring, summer, autumn, winter around the sides. And it was also around Manannan. And they just kind of wanted, Manannan was the god of the Isle of Man, Manannan MacLear. And also his symbol was the triskelion, and that's possibly part of the origin of the 3 legs of man, the symbol of the island. So I had to get into myth for this, and there's sort of there was 2 ideas with this, and I put them forward to the people in the unit, and I had a meeting with them. Luckily, I was absolutely exhausted when I had this meeting. And a guy looked at my work and said, it reminds me of Van Gogh's The Scream. It actually meant Munch's The Scream. But it was incredibly rude, but actually he was bang on, because that's how I was feeling. And I'd had some other teaching about the energy that you put into the work is what shines out. And I'd been going, I don't know what to do in the middle. Anyway, I did this much calmer work and made sure that I was calm whenever I painted it because of this sort of environment that it was going into. And then my next project, because of all the energy stuff, the post office got in touch with me and said that we want to do a set of stamps to promote food and farming on the Isle of Man, but about how food and farming have the energy of the Isle of Man in the food. So yeah, I did this lot, and it was a really cool process. I used to collect stamps as a kid, so it was a real privilege. And I got to design the Frank mark, first day cover mark, and we've got a little triskelion here with a seed in the centre and a growing shoot and a bud and a leaf around it. And then this is a land triskel, as I call it, and it's like a triskelion in the landscape. And these are like the first class stamps for the Isle of Man for the year, and these images are still used to promote Manx food and farming. So the next project, this is Peel on the Isle of Man, and this is actually St Patrick's Isle, and I live right kind of there in the middle, and there was a big regeneration project on the island, and it was quite sort of controversial, and I was asked to design some metalwork, and I thought, oh yeah, that'll be interesting. And I sort of walked blindly into these projects, and because people were not that thrilled with what's happening, or aspects of it, it was just kind of around about this area here. I thought, this has to be good, really have to nail it. I did feel physically sick for a long time working on this one, and I thought, right, what can I do? And I was floundering around looking for themes, and then I did a sort of Google, and I found that we had St Patrick. I found reference to St Patrick landing on the island in Peel, and there's all St Patrick's Wells and things. Oh yeah, I forgot about St Patrick and Peel. Yeah, St Patrick's Isle. He's supposed to have landed here. Curlew's helped him. We've got Patrick Street. Patrick is the next door sort of county, as it were, and we have Patrick's Day used to be celebrated in Peel, and you couldn't switch your lights on in the evening. It was like that sort of hiring fair day. So, great, something around St Patrick. And then I found reference to St Patrick chanting the Deer's Cry to send Manannan on his way. And it's sort of like Ireland, we have this dance of sort of pagan and Christian beliefs. So that's what I did my thing on. I thought, right, Deer's Cry. But this time in metal. So it's in the centre of town. This is it through that church that I pointed out. And here it is closer up. So we have, back again. I arise today through strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendour of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, and firmness of rock again. So this is St Patrick's Isle with the castle on it, and I thought this figure could either be St Patrick or me wandering around the back of a castle looking at the view towards the mountains of Mourne, maybe. And then we have the symbol of Manannan. Oh yeah, I forgot a bit about the Deer's Cry. Going back to the Deer's Cry again, the Deer's Cry has two names, St Patrick's breastplate, but another name is the Feth Fiada. And another meaning of the Feth Fiada is the cloak of invisibility that was used by Manannan to protect the Isle of Man. That was also used by St Patrick to protect his followers at Tara. So I say it's this sort of weaving, interlacing thing. So yeah, in this work we have the history of fishing on the Isle of Man, of boats. We have sort of Viking boats, Manx, Nickies, Nobbies, herring drifters, different types of fishing boats and sailing boats. And then all the sort of nature of the island underneath. The town loved it. Great. I could live in Peel once more. So that was cool. Oh yeah, and then here it is. It throws a great shadow on the ground, which is a real bonus. And it's lit so that there's shadows at night as well. So yeah, it's a really cool piece of work. As I said, I'm doing some more metalwork now for the local cathedral as well. I designed the work, and then a friend sort of translated it into digital files. So yeah, it's a really cool job. What was next? Oh yeah, next job. So then I get asked to exhibit with one of my childhood mentors, David Gilbert. He had died, but I had. It's a big show, and I'd gone up to the farm as a child, and they had parrots and these magical sculptures up there, and we got a goat from them, and I just thought, right, I'm going to have to do some new work. I didn't have time to do too much work, but I thought new work, and I just sat down one evening, and I had this kind of flowing line from doing so much work, so much drawing for the Peel screens, that I just did this one evening. And in it we have, we have Polly the parrot there, and then sort of this little parrot emerged, Netta the goat, who was my little friend when I was young, and then one of David's sculptures there. And then I started doing more of this sort of line work, and this is the sort of thing that I'm wearing, where I just do this free flowing line and then sort of Celticize it. And yeah, it's kind of going back to ArchibaldKnox. It's not steadfastly following his work, it's more sort of being inspired by it and doing it in my own way, which is very much, what I've done. So then we get to lockdown, and I do a Not a Day project, and I'm sort of playing with different techniques here to see what works, watercolour techniques with ink and whatever, and it's one of those sort of 30-day projects, and I work on this, and partly also, because it's the simple knot, which I've been also commissioned by the Board of Education to do, 5 minutes, great, okay, to do a teaching project all about ArchibaldKnox's knotwork. And I sort of, just in order to make it teachable, I take it down to the most basic form, the simple knot, and I'm sort of doing these as a way of inspiring the children that are going to be looking at this project. So anyway, this was then seen by Douglas Borough Council, and they'd had a brief for bright Celtic banners for the refurbishment of Douglas Promenade. Now, Douglas Promenade is 2 miles long, and originally they'd asked for about 30 designs. So I then sort of revisited all of the Celtic stuff and started mining it for little motifs that I could put into sort of long, thin form. And in the end, 11 were chosen, thank God it wasn't that many. And I did them. And one of the ones that's right, going back to ArchibaldKnox, because I was looking at the Celtic stones of the island, ArchibaldKnox and other stories. And this one is the Key Row page from the Deer's Cry. And I used this knot for the yellow banner that you can see in the hall. And yeah, there's 174 banner sites down Douglas Prom. So Douglas Prom's been Nicola DIXON. It's really cool to see. That was a little bit of a view. Another one of the banners was this one, which was inspired by ArchibaldKnox's grave. And it's cool that one was held within it. So yeah, and here is Knox's grave. Here lies ArchibaldKnox, humble servant of God in the ministry of the beautiful. So, there we go. That's my talk. Yeah. And I'd also like to thank Manx National Heritage for use of the Deer's Cry images and the Isle of Man Arts Council for funding me to be here. Thanks, Art. Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. Great.